Hey there, Romanus.
Hello, Davis.
Happy Friday to you, my friend.
Happy Friday, Davis. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And here we are back in the studio, so, what have you been watching lately? Anything good?
Well, the Penguin series. I've been rewatching 30 Rock.
I've actually never seen that show.
I highly recommend it.
That's what everybody says.
I mean, you like shows like Parks and Rec.
Right? Oh, I love sitcoms. I'm a big sitcom fan.
And what I do wish that I could do sometimes is rewatch stuff for the first time. Like I do miss the first time I just stumbled upon 30 Rock. Because when I was growing up, I never got to watch those shows. But as an adult, I just appreciated it more. I think I watched it during college.
Sure.
But
I'm trying to adopt that mindset a little bit more of when I go into something and I'm about to watch something for the first time, I'm trying to be more self-aware of that fact that I can really cherish that first experience and not take it for granted. Because part of getting to watch something for the first time that you're looking forward to seeing is that anticipation build-up. Mm-hmm. And then once you watch it and it's over, it's like kind of like, damn, I wanted that to keep going.
Is there what's one movie, show, whatever, that you wish you could rewatch over again?
Like for the first time?
For the first time.
Honestly, because it's now the 10-year anniversary of this film, Christopher Nolan's Interstellar.
Okay.
I don't think I have ever had a better first-time theatrical experience for a movie in my entire life to this day. That was just an out-of-body experience. Very emotional, very intense, and just visually and technically masterful. And that was something that I would love to experience in theaters again. And I'm planning to go and see it at the start of next month for its re-release in IMAX. So what about you?
This might be a tough one, but I might have to go with maybe this is okay. Why did I ask this question not having any idea? For a TV show, it might be something like Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But I wish I could just rediscover Larry David and that humor all over again. And I'm in that crowd that saw Curb way before Seinfeld. Or like I could just appreciate Curb way before I could appreciate Seinfeld, even though I think I started watching Curb when I was in like 6th grade.
Word.
But that's one show I wish I could rewatch. Maybe the first season of The Wire. I wish I could rewatch for the very first time.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah,
when that show was releasing.
Yeah. As far as movies, it might be something like. See, okay, this is a movie that you probably don't know, but it's a Hayao Miyazaki animated movie.
Okay, Studio Ghibli.
Yeah. The Cat Returns.
You've talked about how much you love that film before.
Yeah,
on an unreleased episode.
I wonder why it's unreleased. I don't know, but anyway.
Because it's 3 fucking hours of recording, and I don't feel like doing all that editing.
We should just draw the curtain back a bit for the audience. We tried to do a favorite movies episode.
Twice.
Yeah. And even, so the first attempt, Davis talked way too much, and then we went like 3 hours. We had fun recording.
It was a good recording,
but it would not be a great episode for you all to enjoy.
No.
So we said, okay, let's reattempt it, but like just try to speed through it. That second attempt was 2 hours.
Yep.
So
I think it was even longer than 2 hours. Even still, God. It was we're not getting this down.
we should revisit it.
I'm down to do that. I think a good kind of experiment will be at the end of the year when we make a top 10 favorite films of the year list.
Yeah.
And that'll be kind of a testing the waters of how we can make this work, and then we can pivot over to our actual favorite movies of all time.
Yeah. Or what I was thinking, maybe we could do like a favorite movie series where we, like, you choose a movie, I choose a movie, and we review
That's a good idea.
Those two in one episode.
People, let us know, even though you don't tell us anything or give us any feedback. We love you anyway, but let us know. If you would be interested in us starting up a little mini series of us just going back and forth between Ramen Davis's favorite films.
Yeah.
There's some potential there.
And go see Interstellar and The Cat Returns.
Definitely.
Fantastic movies.
And watch The Penguin, since we're also talking about TV. It's really good.
It is good.
If you liked The Batman, if you kind of like good gritty crime drama, akin to something like The Sopranos in a lot of ways, like check out The Penguin. It's one of the more surprisingly great shows of the year.
Very shocking.
Very shocking, yeah. The finale is, unforgettable.
I probably put it over House of the Dragon season 2.
Oh, I definitely would. It's up there for me and one of my favorite shows that I've seen this year. Definitely. And I was not expecting that.
Right, yeah. No. I was expecting that I probably was going to hate it.
I thought I was not going to find it that interesting.
Yeah.
And the first episode was pretty gripping.
But it just goes to show you that with good writing, you can make any character interesting.
And that's what it was. It turned into what I would actually consider one of the best comic adaptations I've seen, like especially for TV.
Yeah, because they abandon a lot of the gimmicky tropes of the Penguin, right? Like he isn't a guy that's in love with birds. He's a criminal that has a little waddle because he has
he's deformities,
a bum leg, and so they just make fun of him by calling him the Penguin.
And it's more like deeply rooted insecurities.
Yeah.
And when you talk about like a villain origin, this should be the template going forward if you want to build your villain up. Because I recently watched, I honestly don't know why I did this. I, for the first time, watched the second Venom movie, Venom, Let There Be Carnage.
Why?
That's what I said to myself after I finished it. I was like, why did I watch this? This was an incredible piece of shit movie.
God damn.
I hated it. I thought it was so bad. I couldn't, like, it took me 3 days to get through it. I just kept going back to it.
It was so bad they made a third one.
And it's not a long movie. It's like an hour and a half. And so I watched 30 minutes of this movie over the course of 3 days. And I'm watching this movie and I'm like, this is bad. Everything about this is bad. This is a terrible way to portray very renowned villains in comic book media on screen. And then I watched that right after The Penguin, and so it was just a huge step down. And The Penguin knows how to characterize a villain. They know how to make the villain three-dimensional and interesting, but not give him, no spoilers, any redeeming qualities whatsoever.
No.
And I loved that
about
that series. It took risks. So, great show. I would highly recommend that one. But yeah, other than that, I watched both of the Suspiria films recently.
What the hell is that?
Suspiria, it's a Dario Argento film from the late 70s. Okay. It's kind of like a cult classic. One of the most visually impressive films that I've ever seen. It's kind of hard to explain the plot because there's barely a plot. But in 2018, Luca Guadagnino did a remake of the film with Tilda Swinton and Dakota Johnson. And I watched that a couple nights ago. Also very different from the original, one of the more challenging and ambitious remakes that I've seen for horror. And I'm still sitting with that one because it does a lot of things. It's a lot more expansive and less simplified than the original, but both very, very unique and interesting pieces of media that I've seen, and I'll definitely revisit them in the future. But yeah, just been chewing on some new films, some new TV, gearing up for the last month and a half of the year for film and television.
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah,
a lot to unpack.
There's a lot, and I think with Anora and the film that we're going to talk about today, it seems like for me at least, we're finally kind of getting past that 2-month dry spell that we had in the early portions of fall between September and October, where you and I weren't really going to the theater to see a lot of the new stuff coming out.
There just wasn't anything interesting. Like, why would I waste my afternoon on Venom 3?
Exactly. I'm not going to go see Venom 3. I'm not going to go see Beetlejuice.
No.
We just could not get ourselves out of the house to see Megalopolis.
No, and we made fun of it, and it's probably unfair to make fun of a movie you haven't seen. But
I plan to watch that movie at some point.
And you just never did.
And I just never did.
Yeah.
But I'll watch it. But in my own time, I feel like we were putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to actually go and see it. And then we just couldn't feel like we weren't getting the sensation that it was going to be worth our time.
No.
And so we're just like, maybe we'll just revisit that one day.
Or not.
Or not.
I'm okay with it.
I know, right? Yeah. But yeah, we're still watching stuff. just not at the movies, but we're getting back to the movies. We got some. We're going to talk about a movie today, and next week we got Gladiator coming out, and there's some great stuff coming out in December. I'm really looking forward to Nickel Boys, Nosferatu, The Brutalist. I even went and saw Clint Eastwood's recent film, Juror Number 2, and the new Edward Berger film, Conclave, too, which I think Conclave would be worth doing a review on at some point.
Okay.
Especially since we're about to talk about some religion today.
Oh, yes.
And
fun subject.
Very fun subject. We've never really talked about that subject in the context of film.
Okay.
We kind of maybe touched on it with the Exorcist retrospective we did last month.
Yeah, sure.
But I think this movie has a lot more to chew on in terms of what religion is and what it means, for me at least. So, yeah, as I always like to say, without further ado, my name is Davis Leaf. This is the Loose Leaf Media Podcast. I'm here with my co-host,
Romanus.
And today we are going to talk about the new film, Heretic, starring Hugh Grant and directed by the team of
Scott Beck and Brian Woods.
Yep, also written by them. And I have seen this movie twice now. I saw it last Thursday. For record, we are recording this on the 15th of November. And I saw it again on Tuesday. And I believe you saw it last night.
Yes.
And I have plenty to say about this film, as I'm sure you have some things to say as well. So, Romanus, what did you think about Heretic?
I'll read a summary first.
That sounds
before
great.
I get into it. Two young missionaries are forced to prove their faith when they knock on the wrong door and are greeted by a diabolical Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant, becoming ensnared in his deadly game of cat and mouse. How did I feel about it? It was okay.
Yeah.
It did make me think that maybe A24 is a bit overrated.
You think so?
It got me to start thinking about other A24 movies I've seen, especially this year. And there's a lot of style, but maybe not as much substance.
You don't think so?
No. And in this movie, in my estimation, it was clearer than any other movie before, particularly Longlegs. And then I'm also thinking of Everything Everywhere All at Once, where like two movies that I did enjoy, but looking back on it, I haven't gone to see those movies as much, which is weird considering that I did enjoy them immediately after. I felt like I did enjoy them immediately after seeing them, but I just haven't revisited those movies because I think they just weren't as intellectually satiating as other movies that I do go back to.
Sure. Like the replay value just isn't there.
Yeah. But
I definitely felt that way a little bit about Everything Everywhere All at Once. I saw it in theaters as well.
Same.
And great time at the movies. It even went on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture the following year. And it was very well deserved in a lot of ways. And I think it was one of the more crowd pleasing films that A24 had distributed. But yeah, I haven't felt that strong desire to return to that film. I feel like I will at some point, but I just haven't hit that. And
like, I'll try to explain, right? I'm not the person that will watch a movie and at the end of it, so what? You know, just remember when you were talking about the two girls that left Honora and they were like,
oh, yeah.
I didn't like that ending, and we were both like, what did you want? Right? I'm not unreasonable. I do think about the end of these movies, but I think that the arguments about religion that this movie brings up are not original. No. And you can find them pretty much anywhere on the internet. And it just it makes me think, like, what is this movie trying to say?
Sure.
And I there's enough in it where I can draw some conclusions on my own about a specific character.
Yeah.
But other than that, this movie isn't gonna impart some grand unifying truth on you about religion.
Sure.
It's not that movie. Now, I did enjoy it as a thriller, as a horror movie. It was very effective in that way. And even just the simple, well, maybe simple to me because I'm a man, but just the tension that two women can feel in a room with a man that's not letting them leave. I felt that the entire movie.
I think what's nice is the movie addresses that almost immediately.
Absolutely.
Which makes it feel so contemporary. Because before we like really kind of go into some of the details of this film, the film gives off this feeling like it's a 1980s camp film almost. Because characters are making decisions sometimes, but questioning the decisions that they're making.
Absolutely.
Their characters are constantly making the wrong decisions, but they're constantly addressing that should we do it this way? But they're also frequently facing roadblocks that get in the way of making the right decisions, so they have to pivot to an alternative, which I think also felt very contemporary, but the way the movie is presenting itself feels like a very 80s style campy film. And I almost felt like it was almost Hitchcockian at times too.
I could see that.
Like Hitchcocking, but without kind of instantly revealing what the mystery actually is.
Sure.
Yeah. I actually have a question for you. I'm just curious for just kind of strengthen the conversation a little bit. What is your personal relationship with religion?
I don't believe in God, and sometimes even religious people annoy me. So like, I don't know if maybe that answers. Well, maybe I shouldn't even say that. I mean, if you're mad at me, then look, it's if you believe in God, then anything that I say shouldn't matter, right?
Yeah.
But I was raised Baptist Christian. My family to this day is still very devout. For me and just my own sanity, like I just prefer not to believe in God. It's more of like a logical and emotional decision. Like on the one hand, the logic is there's just no way for me to prove that God exists or disprove it. And so I just decide that, like I don't have to live by any standard or rules that aren't my own. And then the emotional side is I just don't want to believe that like there's a sentient being that's responsible for every good and bad decision or bad thing that's ever happened to me. So those are the two, like whichever one that you prefer to resonate with, they're both equally true for me. But for other people, yeah. And then I will say not religious people annoy me, but I think evangelists annoy me. So like
That's very specific.
If you're knocking on my door bothering me, that annoys me. Or if you're on the sidewalk with a microphone preaching about how women shouldn't wear pants, it's gonna piss me off.
That's fair.
It does piss me off.
No, I understand. We see people like that all the time when we go into downtown
Silver Spring. Yeah,
almost every day there's
God
somebody there doing
damn.
that.
And
oh
my God.
Don't say that in front of them.
Oh well, you're right. Oh wow. Well, excuse me.
I think that's one of the more interesting explorations of Heretic is the juxtaposition between faith and devotion and logic and reason. It's literally kind of showcased at one scene in the movie where there's just a scene where Mr. Reed writes these words on two different doors and gives these characters an option to choose something for themselves. And I completely understand where you're coming from. I was not raised by any religious faith whatsoever.
Well, lucky you.
No, I am grateful for that. I was very close with. I'm serious.
I know that's why funny.
I feel very grateful that that was never subjected upon me, and that I was able to kind of like choose my own dogma in that way. But I was very close with some families growing up in the sundown town of Red Wing, Minnesota, with people that do go to church and practice as a part of organized religion. Red Wing, Minnesota, there's a church on every street corner. It's kind of
Midwest.
It's very Midwestern culture.
Yeah.
It's a little gratuitous for me. And they're all different denominations, but I would go. I went to church a few times just out of curiosity and respect for some of the people that I was close with. But I was also extremely young and didn't really give myself that moment to think like, I don't really want to do that, or I have no reason to do that. So it just came out of a sense of respect. And I kind of get the ritual of doing it and everything. And there was a portion of me that when I was younger, very much respected the community orientation of all of it too. Seeing all of these people just kind of come together and be in unity and harmony with this one thing. But as I got older, I started to recognize the way that people project their belief systems and sensibilities onto everybody else, and by extension, use it as an excuse to pass harsh judgment onto other people, which to me always kind of came as a contradiction because, you know, they say that God is the only one that can really spend time judging people. But I started to distance myself from a lot of those circles and communities just because it didn't align with me. And it wasn't something that I felt passionate about whatsoever. And then by the time I really kind of got to that middle school age, I took a class on world religions and the history of religion. And we studied all these kind of different sectors of religion, Eastern and Western. And it was interesting. I loved learning about all of it. And to this day, from a philosophical point or a theological point, I still find it very interesting because it is a system and it's belief and it's how you practice it that makes all the difference too. And I eventually just kind of came to the conclusion I'm perfectly comfortable just remaining agnostic. I don't really feel like putting any energy into any religion whatsoever. It does me no good, and it wouldn't do any good to anyone else in my life because I would ultimately just end up faking it.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of not being so absolutionist. And that's the kind of mindset that I get from a lot of people that practice religion, and it's a little bit too absolutionist, and it's distasteful to me a little bit, but not to sneer on anybody else who does practice religion.
No, of course not.
It's
not like what I just did.
It's very much not for me. It can be very challenging not to just kind of sneer back at the people that are just spending time sneering at you for not being a part of their church or whatever. But for me personally, going back to this movie,
right,
I loved it. I thought it was one of my favorite films of the year because and despite, you know, I understand your point of view of like not really presenting anything that original that you can't find off of some sort of internet Discord, but I found it to be one of the more, what's the word? I don't want to say challenging, but
it provokes a lot of thought.
It's thought provoking, but it's also, I can't think of the word right now, but it had me invested. And I think
absolutely
most of the movie is very dialogue driven, and it's about these characters' exchanges, which is why it works more as like it's a horror film in parts, but it for the most part works as some sort of a psychological thriller.
Yes.
And I think it works very much about that because it's dialogue driven. There is a lot of the dialogue can feel expository, but most of the time it's characters just having exchanges about their ideologies and how the tension is building up because things are just not between these two LDS girls and Mr. Reed. You can just sense the tension building up because they're not seeing eye to eye on these kinds of things. And the two girls, Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton, are still trying to get through to him, but they start to realize that they're not going to, and he's presenting arguments that they don't really have any sort of experience or evidence to debunk.
Right.
And that's when things start to get very interesting and very scary and at times shocking in the movie. And
we should have a spoiler section because there are
I definitely think that there needs to be a spoiler section. We'll push that off to the last 10 or 15 minutes.
Sure. So you make a great point. This is if we call it a psychological thriller, I would agree with that. They use violence, jump scares very sparingly in this movie. All of the tension, or I would say maybe 90% of the tension, is dialogue, and it's ambiance. It's these people in a room, and they're evangelists for the Christian Church of the Latter-day Saints or Mormons, and Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant, is just this very charismatic guy, probably the neighbor that everybody wants, and he seems very inviting. He's bringing them soda and promising blueberry pie. And then
there was a nice just like sidetrack, but there was just a nice detail when he brings that soda out at one point in the movie where it's just like it's pretty much off screen, but you see him bring it in, but you do notice that the girls never once drink the soda.
They don't.
And like another 10 minutes of dialogue goes by. They don't touch the soda because the conversation is so engrossing, but then they go back to address the fact that they weren't drinking the soda. Because drinks from a strange man, let's just take those.
Right.
And
so
it's just like there's a lot of details that the movie addresses like that I just found like they were nice touches.
There are a lot of details. There's a lot of quick cuts to certain parts of the room and certain parts of characters' faces or their bodies that you are just having in the back of your head, like, why did the directors choose to draw attention? But you also realize the character's attention is brought to these parts too. Like, one of the missionaries is noticing how Mr. Reed, Hugh Grant, is sweating more after he came out of the back room, or I don't want to say too much, but like
there's a lot of details.
There's moments that the directors are alluding to visually, or just saying like, bookmark this in the back of your head.
Literally,
they're brought up at different parts of the movie, and then you realize, as much as these two missionaries are trying to proselytize this man, he is investigating them. He is studying them. He's a guy who studied theology in graduate school and was working on a thesis on religion. And
I love that part where he just like brings out the Book of Mormon,
and it's annotated.
And you see all of these posted annotations throughout the book, and it's like that was one of those moments where I'm like, oh, this conversation is getting more and more interesting, right?
It is, and that there's, I would say, maybe 20 minutes where they're just sitting in one room. And
it's a long scene, but the dialogue is so engrossing that it's just like you start to forget that you're in like a psychological horror film or whatever, and you just get so invested in the conversation because it is intriguing. Yeah. It does bring up a lot of interesting points from two sides of the religious spectrum.
It does. And I think a part of it is Hugh Grant's charm. We're used to seeing him in romantic comedies,
but he really plays against type in this movie.
It's his charm is half handsome professor, half handsome cult leader.
Psychopath.
It fits both. And this movie also reminded me of, or it made me think of, just this is what happens when a professor or like a postdoc works really hard and just doesn't get a tenure track position. And so this is where this shit leads to.
Drives them completely crazy.
Just completely mad.
Did you ever see the HBO miniseries The Undoing?
No.
With Nicole Kidman.
And Hugh Grant. Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about, but I didn't see it.
He's great in that series as well. You would probably enjoy it if you'd like something like Mare of Easttown or Sharp Objects or something like that. Okay. You would definitely enjoy that series.
I'll try it out.
It's a great crime drama. But people talk about a lot how he, no spoilers, plays against type in this. And he really does on film, but he definitely plays against type very much in that series.
Okay.
So it came as less of a shock to me when I'm watching his performance and he was doing all of these crazy behaviors and attitudes. But I never seen him in like a straight horror film like this before.
Yeah.
And there was always, because of how we're conditioned to view Hugh Grant in media and pop culture, it was very unsettling for that reason to see him play a character like this.
Yeah.
And he kills it throughout the entire movie.
Very apt. He was great. He was the best part of the movie to me.
I would agree.
I really enjoyed Mr. Reed as a just antagonist. I really enjoyed him, and the other performances too by the two missionaries are great.
It's a great core three of performances where all of them kind of need to hold each other up. But
Sophie Thatcher is Sister Barnes, and Chloe East is Sister Paxton.
Yeah, they were both great. I don't know Chloe East as an actor. I'm not familiar with her background, but I know Sophie Thatcher. I have you ever seen Yellow Jackets?
No, but I know what it is.
It's a solid enough series. But
Chloe East was in The Fabelmans.
She was in The Fabelmans. Okay, yeah, that just came back to me.
And Sophie Thatcher was in Maxine.
I didn't see Maxine.
With the 3 X's.
Yeah, the new one that came out. Yeah, I didn't see it.
Oh, you did? Okay, no. I thought you did.
I saw the first two in that trilogy, I saw X and Pearl.
Oh, okay.
But I have not. I still have yet to watch Maxine.
Okay. Well, apparently she's in Maxine.
Okay. She's pretty good in Yellow Jackets.
Yeah.
She was also in a Beck and Woods film last year, The Boogeyman, I believe. I heard mixed things about it, but I might watch it at some point.
These two, the two missionaries are not slumps. They're great performances,
which is nice too.
Yeah.
Because again, this is like they make these decisions that nobody should make, but it's because they're left with no choice ultimately to make certain decisions.
Well, you said a great thing earlier where there's a lot of second guessing their decisions. So, and you can see in their eyes that they're uncomfortable and they get to the point where they want to leave. And they I'll just say that they're battling their instincts as people and women.
Which is one of the bigger themes of the movie, too.
Right, yeah. But they're also trying to fit in this just this mold of a Mormon missionary who's supposed to be welcoming and just wanting to bring people closer to God. And,
of course.
And that inner struggle just happens throughout the movie, and it's so. Not just at the beginning where they're like, oh,
especially with Sophie Thatcher's character.
Man, she gave. There's one scene where Mr. Reed, in a way, just read her completely.
Yeah,
and brings up a specific traumatic moment about her that he learned about initially in the movie, and just the mix of emotions on Sophie Thatcher's face of just like the anger, pain, anxiety, just everything. Just that moment where as an adult you want to cry, but you're fighting really hard not to. She really popped off the screen.
She really kills it. And she kind of serves as that character between the two girls as the one that's a little bit more on the fence at this point in her life in terms of her devotion to the church. And Sophie East's character, Sister Paxton, is kind of the more sheepish one who doesn't have nearly seemingly as much experience with the church. And her character arc throughout the entire movie is also brilliant.
Yes, I
goes
agree.
In directions that you do not expect.
At the beginning, she comes off as this like very naive, blonde, skinny, tall, like cute Mormon girl, and by the end, you really respect her.
Very much so.
She's naive, but she's also intelligent.
Exactly.
She can put stuff together on her own. She's able to think for herself critically.
Like her character, in a lot of ways, kind of emphasizes one of the themes of just like thinking for yourself that the movie is trying to like emphasize. And when you're talking about what is the movie trying to say, I totally get what you mean too, because that's why I wanted to go see it again, because I was trying to kind of pinpoint where are we going with this, and the movie is just more than anything serving as a deconstruction of legitimacies and illegitimacies in organized religion. And then by the end of the movie, no spoilers, it's a little bit ambiguous, but you're just kind of left with this feeling of like, what did this all mean? Like, to your point. And I think that is kind of the point of the movie, of the movie inviting you not to be so indoctrinated and think for yourself a little bit more before you decide to devote your life to one specific ideology.
I mean, sure, maybe, but again, it's one of those things. It goes back to my point about A24. Like, this movie does a lot of great stuff. It was there were moments of anxiety for me that I felt.
Sure.
The performances were great. I liked just the 80% of this movie is happening in one house, right? Or probably 95.
Yeah, like, it's mostly a bottle film.
And a lot of it is just 3 rooms, right? Just that's it. Or, right, like most of it is 3.
And they make the most of their production design in all those rooms too. And it gets weirder and weirder as the movie goes on.
As you go through this house, it gets fucking weird.
Yeah.
But again, style, but not a lot of substance. Like there's one part of the movie, and again, great performance by Hugh Grant. He goes on this very interesting and, well, maybe not even interesting, but just very entertaining, I'd say, lecture about Abrahamic religions.
It is very. I think that is the better way to put it.
Yeah, it's entertaining. It's engaging.
Another like 10-15 minute scene where he's like making these points with music and board games.
Yeah. And it reminds me of just a very excited lecturer in college. Like I was thinking of two professors specifically, one from anthropology and then one from like a history of Korea class.
And he explains it like he is explaining as a professor.
Yes.
Because objectively, he's like not really trying to frighten these characters.
No.
He's studying them, but he is trying to get them to learn something from him.
Yes.
But it's also kind of plays it. I won't spoil anything.
No. We'll get into it more. But the delivery was fantastic.
That's the scene in the movie where I'm like, he is hamming it up so much, and he's loving this so much.
But I was too. Like, like when you say ham, I'm like, oh, dude, I fucking enjoyed it.
Same.
But the only thing is, again, it's just not, the ideas itself weren't original.
Sure.
Right? Like they're just not very, like he wasn't saying anything that I already haven't heard about religion. Now, again, maybe that's on purpose. Maybe like the truth is, religion has been around for a very long time as far as humans have been on this planet, which I guess is what 1,000 years in Christianity. So like it's like I don't. Again, it's just one of those things where like this movie was engaging, but I don't know if it said anything that I haven't already heard, and maybe that's not necessary for a movie. Like I'm okay with the movie just being engaging.
Sure.
That's completely fine. It did make me think though, and we'll get into this in spoilers, this movie was more about Mr. Reed than the actual two missionaries.
I think this movie could have been because he is the heretic in the story,
yes,
essentially, and entirely.
But I mean, people think that Mormons are heretics.
That's true.
So, like, I think it's sort of a double meaning.
That I think that's what's cool too, is that you can interpret it in both ways.
Yeah.
But you could have like easily taken that out of the title and just titled the movie Mr. Reed.
Sure.
And it would have made perfect sense. It wouldn't have like given up the mystery or anything, because it definitely does also play like a mystery thriller in a lot of ways, where it's like all of these different puzzles to solve, and everything that's happening plays out like he's playing a board game. He's trying to position his pieces in certain locations, get him to make these decisions for his benefit, and like even down to the kind of abstract shirt that he's wearing on him. It just like it almost looks like this model that he's making at one point in the movie. And there's just going kind of back to the details, I just really appreciated how well this movie plays out like a mystery. And by the end of it, not everything comes off as like the most shocking or surprising in the third act, but the movie wraps up all of the pieces that had already established earlier in the story pretty flawlessly to me.
Yeah, another thing that you just touched on, he is treating this entire interaction with these two missionaries like a board game. Like he even has a model, a miniature of his house with all of the different rooms and entryways, and it makes me think that he sees himself as God. And without spoilers, what I came to imagine about this movie was that this was a guy who just studied and read, like just was a voracious reader when it came to religion, and he just came to no conclusion in a way. Like just everything came to either no conclusion at all or a very unsatisfactory conclusion. And I guess when we get into spoilers, maybe we can talk about it. I guess
we should probably do that at some point. It's like we're like tiptoeing around so much of this.
Then let me make this final point.
Yeah.
Like I think that he just was a guy who was so just entrenched in his work, and his work being such a core just question in humanity, and the fact that he came to either no conclusion or unsatisfactory conclusion drove him crazy. And maybe in his head he says, if there is no God, then I am God. And so now he can play this kind of authoritarian role where he is trapping religious, trapping religious women who he feels are very naive and
just impressionable.
Yeah, easy to control. So before we get into spoilers, Davis, do you recommend seeing this movie?
I highly recommend seeing this movie. I walked out of this theater and I personally thought that this has all the makings of an instant classic.
Wow.
I actually think it's going to be one of those films that years from now people are still trying to interpret and figure out for themselves. And I think this last point that I didn't even think of about this Mr. Reed almost seeing himself as God keeps emphasizing that point in my head where I'm just like, I hadn't thought about it in that way yet. And I think there's going to be many different interpretations of this movie from years to come. And I do think it has the makings of something that could be a classic in time. So, Romanus, do you recommend this movie?
I give it a light recommendation. It's a very good thriller. And if you are into psychological thrillers / horrors, then for sure it's for you. But I just wasn't blown away as much as you, which is completely fine. Like, I think there's enough ambiguity for both opinions to be valid. You know what I mean? Like, it's for some people, it's not going to click. And then for others, it will.
I think, though, what's so great about both of our takes on this is that it is making us think.
Sure.
We have a lot of thoughts about this film and thoughts that we'll go into in just a second, a little bit more so.
Yeah.
But I think that is one of the ultimate points of this movie is that it's trying to incite some sort of a conversation. And I think it does a little bit. This might be a little bit of a loose comparison, but it does a little bit for religion what Civil War did for politics this year, where it's not setting one particular agenda for itself. It's trying to get you to look at all of the pieces at play within the story and kind of draw your own conclusions on where certain people and where certain actions are coming from. Both of my favorite A24 distributed films this year. And they both do similar things for different social systems, I guess. So, we're going to transition into spoilers here. You've been warned. So, can I just say what the moment of this movie that actually shocked me was?
Let's go.
It was the moment where Sophie Thatcher's sister Barnes is kind of they're in that basement and she's eating him up and just saying all of this shit about like how she's checking him and saying it's like I figured out your game. You can't play us. We're too smart for you. And then boom, slashes her throat and she fucking dies. And I was just like, what the fuck? I did not expect that to happen because most of the movie is building her up to be like the protagonist to Mr. Reed's antagonist. And for me with obviously Chloe East as the secondary protagonist. But that pulled the rug out from under me, and I was like, I thought we were supposed to be following her and her journey throughout most of the story, and her friend was just the sheepest one along for the ride. And so that surprised me. That was a nice, fresh direction, and then it completely pivots to Chloe East's point of view for the rest of the story. And it reminded me, have you seen 1917?
Yes.
Yeah, it reminded me of a similar moment that's done in that movie too, where you feel like you're following Tommen Baratheon, and
Jesus.
Then, spoiler alert for that movie, he dies like midway through the movie, and then you start following his friend. Can't remember that actor's name.
He wasn't in Game of Thrones, so it's okay.
No, That's true.
He's not important.
Yeah, I know that he's famous for some other stuff, but I don't know. Then you start following his character throughout the rest of the movie, and you realize this has really been kind of his journey. And they kind of take that tactic in Heretic, and I like that. It was surprising. But beyond the shock value of the film, there isn't a lot of jump scares in this movie. There's like 2 particular moments.
There's 2, and maybe they're not even. One is just kind of like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Like the spider crawling through the pipe.
Yeah, that's
fine. I'm fucking jumping at everything.
I didn't like that because I don't like spiders.
Right.
So it kind of got me, but the one following that kind of got me too.
Yeah.
With the woman getting up, and they really build up to that jump scare too. And they let you know it's about to happen perfectly before it even happens.
Yeah.
Like where like the camera just like it's a close up on Chloe's face. The camera is like you can see that there's nobody on the table behind her, and then it slowly like pans to the other side of her face, and you see some dark figure standing behind her.
Yeah.
And the music just ramps up with that, and I was like, this is good.
And this is the so-called prophet of God, who it just is this very
Sure she is.
Sure she is.
Well, I mean, if Mr. Reed's God, then
exactly. That's what I'm gathering from all of this, right? And
I like this take.
God literally gave her a message to impart to other people, right?
Yeah.
Like Mr. Reed gives the prophet that was the switch-in just this sheet of paper that's like, this is what you're going to say to them. And then she goes down to earth, quote unquote, and gives them this knowledge.
Which is nice because, again, this movie constantly does this where they're setting pieces up to have a payoff later in the film because it acts as a mystery thriller. You see him literally writing it, but it's so illegible the first time you see it, even though it's like perfectly in frame. It's the focus shot of the frame for one shot. But it's so illegible, you can't tell what he's even writing. No. And then later, when Chloe East is like piecing everything together, she's like, I think you switched the bodies and you gave the other one a script to read. And then it reveals that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
And that piece of paper we saw earlier that he was writing on was that script.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, nice.
It was a very, like, it felt like a mystery. And I felt myself like cheering for Sister Paxton.
Same.
Because she, at the beginning of the movie, she's, talking about porn and is just very prudish, and she just comes off as just very, just the naivete is just jumping off the screen. I love the dry
sense of humor this movie has too.
Oh yeah,
for like the first half of this movie, I'm actually chuckling way more than I expected to watching this movie. Well, just right out of the gate with the first conversation on Magnum condoms.
Yeah,
I'm like, what the hell?
Well, even there were moments with Sister Paxton and Mr. Reed where, like, Mr. Reed will quote something. Like, so he's, with great power comes great responsibility. And
Spider-Man.
Robert Frost. But you know what? My dumb ass, too, was like, she's like, oh, Spider-Man. Like, Mr. Reed's quoting Spider-Man.
No, he's quoting renowned journalist Robert Frost.
Exactly. Yeah. The great poet Robert Frost. No, there were moments like that. One critical moment to me, right? And a lot of people have maybe negative opinions about Mormons, you would say.
Maybe.
Right? They even talk about Book of Mormon, the play, at the beginning of the movie, and just their Sister Paxton and Sister Barnes are commenting on how they feel about the movie.
They do a good job at showing how isolated they feel too because of their religious practices. Yeah, which was also just nice character building. Yeah, it made them feel like actual Mormons.
But also the movie takes a chance to remind you that these are still people.
Exactly.
So at the beginning of the movie, they see this group of girls that are like younger than them, maybe preteens or teenagers and stuff. And the teenagers ask, hey, can you take a picture with us? And they're nice, Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton. So they decide to take the picture with the girls. And one of the girls says to Sister Paxton, do you wear magical underwear? And Sister Paxton is just like, what? And then she, like, the teenager pulls down Sister Paxton's skirt to reveal Sister Paxton's underwear, and it's just very embarrassing. And the next scene is just Sister Paxton and Sister Barnes walking just very silently.
And Paxton is like sniffling and crying a little bit about it.
And it's
very easy the movie makes it very easy to sympathize with them.
Well, yeah,
like despite whatever like pre-notions that you have about Latter-day Saints, it's very easy to sympathize with them and see them as real people and real characters through like this movie.
Because they are, right? Like anyone would feel embarrassed. That's fucking terrible.
Yeah, like I mean, my first reaction is like, that's fucked up.
Yeah, I literally said I try to not talk during the movie, but when that happened, I said out loud, "You little fucking bitch." And the guy next to me was like, "Yeah, that was fucked up."
That was fucked up.
And that I never.
I love that exchange.
Yeah, it was
for real though. What a payoff that moment has in the very end of the movie though too.
Yeah,
with the whole like magic underwear thing.
Yeah.
Like that's like for whatever. Again, the movie doesn't spare any time of setting things up and paying them off later in the film.
Yeah.
And that's why I can't not appreciate this film's attention to detail, even for like brief moments like that you don't think are going to have any impact by the end of the movie. But what's also nice about the film is that it's not a mystery thriller for the audience to piece together themselves. It's literally a mystery thriller that's made for the characters to piece together and for you to watch the characters unfold things.
Yes.
Like you notice that there are certain things that are off and out of line and everything, but you aren't given enough as an audience member to kind of piece exactly what the conclusion is for yourself.
Sure.
Which is why when like everything is kind of more revealed at the very end of the movie, it's not the most surprising, but it's satisfying because there was a purpose for why all of these things are happening. Like even with the key. For the bike locks, right when the girls are about to walk out, and they're like, "We should just get up and go," and they're about to do that, and before they even check to see if the door is open, before they realize it's locked, my first thought in my head was just like, "Y'all are about to leave your jackets," but then they do, but then they'd say, "Wait, we need our jackets. Should we just go?" And I'm just like, I'm just shaking my head. Yeah, fuck
same.
The jackets.
Yeah, fuck them jackets. Fuck the jackets.
Then. And they do that, and then they realize the door is locked, and they cannot open it because it's like reinforced steel or some shit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank God this movie thought of like reasons to keep them trapped inside the house and gave them reasonable things to think about before they decide to just get up and leave.
And that is probably the very last moment where in a different horror movie you say, y'all motherfuckers should have left. At this moment, you should have fucking left. And this movie decides, yes, this is the moment where we're going to have smart protagonists. And we just make it so that, like, they're in an impossible situation because they've
set a trap.
He set... God damn it.
I've been waiting about 5 minutes to use that one.
Fuck that movie. You know what? Hey, by the way, this is the kind of movie... that if Shyamalan made more often, I'd be like, okay, yeah, Shyamalan is.
This could have easily been like an idea from Shyamalan.
What?
Yeah, conceptually. Are you kidding me?
Too bad it's not, though.
No, I'm glad that it's not. I'm saying that like 20 years ago, this could have conceptually been something Shyamalan would have thought of.
But I'm saying
because it has that psychological thriller approach, but stylistically not anything like him, but conceptually, because I've always called him a concept artist.
Right.
I could see this coming out of Shyamalan's mind.
If he had 4 more movies,
and he would have called it Trap.
If he had 4 more movies like this, then I would be like, okay, yeah, like I get the Shyamalan hype, but he don't.
No,
he would have called Mr. Reed Mr. Trap then. Like that's really what it is.
He's the Trap. Yeah, because that was Josh Hartnett's character.
Yeah,
his name was Trap.
His name was Trap, or the Butcher.
Well, that was his, media name.
Trap Johnson.
His real name was Trap.
Trap Johnson.
Trap Trapper.
Trap Trapper. Trap Trappington.
Trap.
He's a socialite in England. In England, and now he moved to Philadelphia, which looks a lot like Canada.
Yeah. Oh my god. Let's stop.
Looks like Toronto.
It was Toronto.
The street signs didn't look right. They should have just
everything would look just like so much like not Philadelphia.
We love Philly, by the way.
I love Philly so much.
Podcast loves Philly,
this is a pro Philly podcast.
We're terrible sightseers because all we did really was go to a Philly bar, just a sports bar.
We went and did some touristy.
We
stuff.
saw the Rocky Steps.
We went to that big food court.
Yes,
which was awesome. One of the coolest things I've seen. We went to the Rocky Steps and we saw the city a little bit. We went to that really cool interactive museum. Stop saying that we didn't do stuff. We did stuff.
No, well, the most fun I had was getting drunk at the sports bar
low
and
key,
having a great time.
Low key.
Right? That's what I'm saying. I will do that.
We were like engaging with the community. We were talking with people there.
Talking shit.
It was fun.
It was a great time.
We had that cliche moment where I was like, I could live here.
Yes.
I might.
I could live here for 30 minutes.
30 minutes. And then I'm like, I'm too drunk. I need to get on a train home now.
Yeah. And then that was also the same day that the assassination attempt
Trump got shot.
Trump. Yeah. He got shot at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. He got shot at. The Secret Service shot him.
No, whoa. Yeah. We don't believe that.
We can't say that now.
We don't
he's
believe
our president.
that. We don't believe that. Davis does not
He's
believe
like
that.
2 miles away from us, probably. He's like, go get those guys.
Yeah. Oh, well.
We're wiretapped.
Oh, God.
Anyway,
yes.
Heretic.
No, there's the one scene that really wrapped me into where I was like, oh, I think I am seeing something that is worth talking about, is his lecture where he is drawing comparisons between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and the Monopoly game.
Three.
The big three. Yeah, what he calls it. And he is drawing comparisons to Monopoly and just talking about the history of Monopoly and how it's gone through multiple iterations over its time, just like how the Abrahamic religions are just iterations of the same story. And
that was one of my favorite things, like the whole iteration monologue.
Yeah.
The zany spinoff.
Yes, and he
the way that he uses music. That was like that was the main way that he was making his point on iterations.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, I think there was like a really clever thing that the movie did at the end.
Knocking on Heaven's Door.
Knocking on Heaven's Door, performed by Sophie Thatcher.
Yes.
In this movie.
Yeah.
Iterations. And I honestly thought they were going to go so far because they play the Holly song. They play the Radiohead song.
Yeah.
They didn't play the Lana Del Rey song that he described.
No, yeah.
And I thought the movie was going to close its credits with that. But they also surprised me, and they did a Bob Dylan cover. Sophie Thatcher performing an iteration of Knocking on Heaven's Door.
But also
more of a cover,
but that song has been covered relentlessly. Also by like Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, Guns N' Roses.
Like that's probably my favorite one. But no, I caught that too.
That was clever. I liked that.
Yeah. That whole there's the whole scene where they're in the second room that looks like library / auditorium / church.
Yeah.
And it was
great
just
production design
because it just sort of just show it's this very complex setting.
It's a very confusing amalgamation of a bunch of different settings.
It is, but he's a confusing guy.
Exactly.
He's a very enigmatic guy. And that lecture just it was entertaining. It did catch me.
Yeah. That's probably my favorite scene in the movie, just in general.
Yes.
Just right when they walk into the library.
Yeah.
And the rest of that scene before they start entering the basement.
Yes.
I mean, the rest of the movie is great too, but that scene in particular, just the monologue being given by Mr. Reed is just. That was so engaging.
Yeah.
You described it as like very entertaining, and that's exactly what it was. And I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, and I didn't want to stop listening to him.
Right. And it happens right after the two girls are like, hey, your front door is locked. Can you please just let us leave? And he's like,
the front door's locked.
The front door's locked, but
Cockney.
The front door's locked. It won't open until tomorrow morning. But if you want to leave, you can leave through the back from these two doors. And they're like, what?
That's what's so great is like there's so much dry self-awareness in this movie of how ridiculous this whole sounds and how it is exactly what it looks like. But he's like trying to play it off like, oh no, like you make your choice. And that's also part of the game, is he wants these characters to hear him out, and then give them these options of things to choose for themselves and think for themselves.
Well, there's the illusion of an option.
Yeah,
because the two doors lead to the same place, right? Like, and the characters don't ever realize that in the movie in a philosophical sense, but they just are trying to get out of this fucking basement, and they just go through the loop that these two stairwells are going through, are leading to, right? But that was another horrific scene where Sister Barnes opens the first door and she realizes that it just leads to a basement. It's not like the door that leads outside.
They don't show that specifically. They don't show exactly what it is until she opens the second door. Yeah. Which was a nice way to continue to build the tension, because you know that whatever she saw in that door was not good. No. And was not their ticket out of here.
It's not. And what really, that's a great point, because before they open the doors, he writes on one door belief and on the other disbelief. And just the philosophy of, like, no matter what you choose, they all lead to the same dark conclusion.
And Barnes knows that. And after she opens the door and sees that, because she, like, there's also this whole thing where it's just like he is able to kind of draw them in because he tells them that he has a wife that lives in Hout. And
yes,
that's a whole thing in the movie too. But the way that things really start to get, for me, where I'm just like, this is the point of no return now, is the moment where he's about to say, like, one more time, I'll go ask if she'll come out, after they once again request that she show her face. And then he's about to walk into one of those doors, and then he quickly turns around and says, let me ask you a question before I do. Do you still believe my wife is in that room? And that was the moment where I'm like, fuck. And it reminded me perfectly of this moment from, oh, God, don't hate me, David Fincher's adaptation of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
My God, let's just review a David Fincher movie. So
we will. We will one day. I'm so sorry I had to do that.
But I think I know the moment that you're referring to.
But the moment at the very end of the movie when the killer essentially is about to get revealed, I'm not going to really explain who it is because I highly recommend this film. Yeah. But Daniel Craig is on his way out of this killer's house. The killer's just like, well, where are you going? What are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm just looking around. And he's like, I wanted to tell you something. Come on in. I'll make you a drink. And he comes in, he has his drink, and then the killer pulls a gun out, and he's like, why do people ignore their better instinct? It's funny to think that the fear of danger is more strong than the fear of offending somebody. And I've carried that sentiment and thought in my head ever since I've seen that movie. Yeah. And I think that perfectly plays into some of the larger themes of this movie, about how people don't necessarily not trust their instincts, but they don't listen to their instincts.
They don't, but I want to just draw a distinction between that moment in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and this movie. There really, in Heretic, is no reason for the two protagonists in this movie to believe that Mr. Reed is a murderer, right? Like, but as soon as they step through that door, they're locked in. It's over.
And that's why it's just like they're not given a choice. They're not. So every time they do try to trust their instincts, they're trapped. Yeah. They can't find any way out of this.
They can't. And it just, Mr. Reed he's set up an environment where he's in full control of the time and space. Just it's his domain.
His main point by the end of the movie is creating a control system where he gets people to make decisions for themselves and then puts them right where he wants them to be in the very end.
Like God.
Like predetermination.
Yeah.
Like you're really blowing my mind with this thesis on like how Mr. Reed essentially like views himself as God.
I think that
I wonder if there's any connection between the word or name Reed and any sort of.
I keep thinking of like Mr. Reed, like mystery.
Mr. Reed.
Like for
God works in Mr. Reed ways.
Oh, stop it! No, I just was thinking like for the Riddler Edward Nigma.
Oh yeah, Enigma.
Like it sounds corny, but I fucking love it.
I've always loved
I'm a huge
it.
Batman fan. But anyway,
they
also,
changed that at one point too. They changed his name to Eddie Nashton, which is still the same name.
Yeah,
but I'm just sidebar for Batman lore.
I love Batman, but no.
Maybe
I think
now.
I
maybe
think
fan cast.
Hey, why not?
Fan cast for Hugh Grant to play a Batman villain.
Which one could he be?
Victor Freeze.
Oh, I'm gonna have to think about that.
It's not true. I don't know. After the Penguin, I think they're gonna go with Harvey Dent.
I think actually, Hugh Grant would be a great Alfred.
Yeah, I see that.
Especially now, like in his age, like I mean, he's not getting any younger. I will say it did piss me off that these two women didn't think they could take Hugh Grant. Like they could have beaten the shit out of Hugh Grant.
Maybe
he's not Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
He's not, but he's still an imposing man.
Is he?
Yeah. Like, to be totally honest, if I was in their position, there is a moment too where they even address that, and Sister Barnes is trying to like indicate like grab this sharp object at one point, and Sister Paxton at one point writes a text message on her phone when Reed is monologuing and like shows it to her when he's not looking, and she questions like run ? And then Sister Barnes is like nah, and I'm like, well, yeah, where are they gonna go? He's got this whole place locked down and he'll find you anywhere you go.
Yeah,
and if you instigate the situation, he'll probably get violent. And I wouldn't, as a woman in their position, I wouldn't want to try and challenge him physically, personally.
Interesting.
Especially they also don't know like what kind of skills that he's hiding too.
Can I tell women a secret?
Okay, I guess this one's for you, women.
Yeah.
Welcome to the late hour.
For our woman audience, all two of you. Hi, Mom. No, but hi, Mom. Hi, Mom. No. I'm gonna just go ahead and say, like, when you have numbers on your side, even like you would say I'm a pretty big guy, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I could fight two adult women that are fighting for their lives. Like they would whoop my ass.
You think so?
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a fucking weapon. Yes.
Oh yeah. Once you bring like objects into the play, that differs the playing field a little bit more.
But they had a sharp object that ends up being the thing that kills Hugh Grant.
Two of them.
Yeah.
Again, one more piece that they perfectly set up that the movie forgets about that gets a nice payoff later in the film.
It's because you forget about it, right?
And the movie does that a lot. It expects you to forget about all of these different pieces, and then they just blindside you with like being another piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
It's nice. So, in the very end, Sophie Thatcher dies, like right at the end of the second act. And then that leaves us with Chloe East's character, Sister Paxton. And right after that moment, she figures it out. Because fucking Reed has to pivot because he kind of loses his mind and kills Sister Barnes. And she's like, he goes on this monologue about simulation theory after that. And that's when I'm I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because he literally, like, probably the most violent moment in the movie is when he like slices Sister Barnes' arm open and takes out her IUD. Yeah. And then he's like, she's a program in a simulation. She's not a real person. She's not going to be resurrected to my religious thesis. And I'm like, and then he goes off on this simulation theory tangent. And I'm like, literally, what the fuck are you talking about right now? Like, what is happening in this movie? Is this what this is now? And then Sister Paxton calls his bluff and she's like, I think you're full of shit. Yeah. I think that you're trying to create a new narrative because you lost control of the situation and you need something else to impose upon me. Yeah. And that's exactly what he does. And she's like, I think you switched the bodies. And I think that woman that came up to us was not the same woman that, quote, died. And that's exactly what happens. And then he locks her in the cellar where she finds the other body. And then she just starts going through all these doors with all these satanic memorabilia on it, which kind of adds a little bit more questions to the mystery of it all too. But to me, it just kind of showcased that he's dabbled in all different kinds of religions and his search to find the one true God.
Has to.
Yep. And then she stumbles upon this room with this very moist room with all of these women locked in these cages.
My goodness.
And he comes in with a fucking watering can at the other side of the room and starts putting water in all of these cages with these women. And then he lays it all out and says, the whole point that I'm trying to make to you is the one true religion is control. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Well, I mean...
like, to his point and the way he's setting everything up, I'm just like, okay, that makes sense. And then once again, she figures out how he did it all, how he got her there. And that's when the magic underwear thing comes into play one more time, and she stabs him in the neck and runs away. But before all that, too, during the simulation argument that he's making, he really goes into another one of the bigger themes of the film, of the butterfly dream, which is where the movie leaves us on, with the idea of that point.
Yeah. Am I a man dreaming of being a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming of being a man?
Yeah. Was it like a Chinese philosophy?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, yeah, the movie, a lot of movies like this, when they reach that breaking point where it's like, oh, like everything starts to be revealed, fall apart.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't.
No. It's satisfying.
It is satisfying.
Like, you can't perfectly figure it out for yourself.
No.
But the movie doesn't necessarily want you to. It wants the characters in the movie to figure it out for themselves. It's not necessarily it's a mystery film where the mystery isn't for the audience. It's not like a whodunit.
Yeah.
It's a mystery for the characters in the movie to solve for themselves. And they do. And it's satisfying. And then, what's her face? Barnes comes back to life briefly for a final theme on her resurrection, saves Chloe East before she's murdered by Mr. Reed by stabbing him with this plank of wood with a bunch of jagged nails sticking out, which they set up perfectly earlier in the film. And then she finds a way out. Butterfly lands in her hand. Quick frame away, quick frame back. The butterfly's gone. Movie ends.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to perfectly... I get how it's the butterfly dream, and I'm trying to perfectly figure that into the whole movie in a way. Because there's a scene early on in the film, too, when they first walk into the house, and we see kind of like a moth flying around this light.
And Sister Barnes is the one that notices the moth, though.
And so maybe the butterfly is supposed to be Sister Barnes in that way, too.
Sure.
That lands on her Paxton's hand at the end.
Perhaps.
I don't know.
But again, I don't know what to think of it. Like,
Same.
I think if they're trying to make a point, I don't know how. Maybe it's just lost on me somehow. Maybe I just don't get it, or
that's the thing.
It wasn't
I'm sure
effective.
there's a point to make there. I just haven't figured it out perfectly for myself yet.
I mean, either way, what I do appreciate about this movie is the point where Mr. Reed loses control of this world that he's created in this lockdown house is very apparent. As soon as the women get the courage to impart violence on him, that's the first time that he's actually violent. He's never physically imposing besides just being a man.
Yeah.
But he's never like crowding them or just like moving very quickly or violently. It's all mostly dialogue that he is threatening. And
that's the point in the movie where he really turns from just kind of being more of a sociopath to just a straight psychopath.
And yeah, exactly. Where it's just very evident. And the worst moment in the movie for me just visually was when he's digging the IUD out of
that was
Sister Barnes' arm.
Fucked up.
And yeah, like I love the moment where Sister Paxton calls him out on his bullshit. And she even begins to copy his cadence at the beginning of the movie when it just comes to dialogue, right? Like she starts to like when like he would ask them, or they would ask him questions or of like which choice, and he would just say yes. Like
I love that.
Sister Paxton
she does that to him. Yeah, and then, I love that moment.
And then she says a quote, and he says, "Oh, is that oh no." At the beginning, it was Voltaire.
Yep.
And then the second quote was Robert Frost.
Yep.
But Sister Paxton was actually quoting Robert Frost.
Yeah.
In the second quote. Yeah. But she was quoting Swamp Thing.
Swamp Thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
Swamp Thing,
Yeah. That was good. That was good.
So like, yeah, it just, It did that moment where Chloe, Sister Paxton stands up to Mr. Reed. It just is. It's one of those moments where you imagine a parishioner in a cult who just finally stands up to the cult leader and is like, yeah, you're full of shit. I've seen through your bullshit. Now I know that you are just like us, and you are.
I mean, the movie doesn't even shy away from that idea.
Yeah.
Like there's a blatant reference in the third act to like Jim Jones even.
Yeah, the drinking the Kool-Aid. Yeah.
Thing, yeah.
And Mr. Reed, for such a like well-read and like SD, he is very hip on pop culture. Like he says
Star Wars.
Yeah, Star
Episode
Wars.
1.
Episode
And he does the most insane Jar Jar impression at one point in the movie.
Lana Del Rey. This is a guy that's like really closed off. He
starts singing "Creep" by Radiohead.
Yeah, and he doesn't even play the original. He plays the acoustic.
He plays the acoustic version, which I think is the better version.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That song starts out Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 as well.
Does it?
Yeah. You still haven't seen that one yet.
I still haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's the opening song for that movie.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's my favorite one. I got to find that on vinyl.
That's such a great song.
I love there's a video where it has a movie clip of some movie that what's his face is in, the Pirates of the Caribbean guy. We should just never mind. Fuck it. We're not gonna get to that. We're already at an hour. We want to wrap this up.
Yeah, let's wrap.
We're at an hour 14. Damn.
Are you shitting me?
No, okay. Maybe I did enjoy this movie.
Maybe you did. I mean, that's the thing. Like, probably enjoy it or not, there's a lot to talk about with this film.
Sure.
And that's why I do feel like it is going to have some sort of a status as a classic for years to come, because it can incite a conversation like this, a very extensive conversation. Yeah. Because I don't remember the last time like a horror thriller has been like a religious horror film in a long time. Like I said, I saw Conclave recently, and that's like a religious thriller. Very different, very good. But this movie, the whole point of the film seems like it's trying to incite a conversation. And I think it accomplishes that because there's a lot of things in this movie worth talking about and discussing. And that's the testament, the New Testament, and the Old Testament of a great movie.
Oh god,
that was dumb. I'm sorry.
Let's
wrap this up.
We're keeping that in.
But I highly recommend this movie. I think it's worth it. I think it's worth everybody's time. You're a little bit more lukewarm on it.
Lukewarm, but it's not a bad movie.
No,
it just is not. Don't go into this movie thinking that it's gonna be like The Exorcist, where I did sort of leave with like hopeful in a very weird way.
That's I see. I feel you there. Yeah, I think my expectations weren't even that high for this film.
No.
Which is why I was very surprised and very impressed by how much I loved this film walking out of it. And I guess that's another lesson. Keep your expectations in check.
Yeah.
So we'll see you guys next week for a review of Gladiator 2. And you're very excited for that one. I know you are.
Oh, yeah.
And the subject of continuing to give us conversation and give us things to talk about. We haven't heard from anybody on our leaf pile in a minute. So all links to send us any sort of thing, any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms even, all links are in the description down below. Hit us up on our social media. There's a link for that there too. And we'll see you guys next week for Gladiator. Take care, everybody. This has been the Loose Leaf Media Podcast. My name is Davis Leaf. Did this with my co-host,
Romanus.
We'll see y'all later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.